Life with bipolar disorder isn't something you can just control. It's not about choosing your moods. It's about surviving a storm that takes over your brain. For me, it's always felt like a roller coaster. The climbs, the drops, the turns you don't see coming. And the hardest part? Most people can't see the ride we're on. They just see you standing there, smiling, and assume you're fine. Let's start with the roller coaster, because that's one of the biggest metaphors I use in my upcoming book. And it's also the one that makes the most sense when I try to explain bipolar to someone. Think about a roller coaster. When it's climbing, there's all this tension and energy building up. That's mania or hypomania. It feels unstoppable, like everything is going faster and faster. Your thoughts, your words, your energy. Sometimes it feels amazing, like you could take on the world. Other times, it feels terrifying, like your body and your brain are racing ahead without your permission. And then there's the drop. Depression. You go from the top of the world to feeling like you've crashed into the ground. For me, those drops are dark, heavy, and suffocating. I feel like I can't move. Like there's no point in trying. And just like a roller coaster, you don't always know when those climbs or drops are coming. Sometimes it takes you by surprise. That unpredictability is exhausting for me and for anyone living with this. One of the hardest parts about living with bipolar is that so much of it is invisible. People can't see your brain chemistry. They can't see the storm that's happening inside. When I was younger, I would go through deep depression, and people thought I was just shy or moody. When I was hypomanic, people thought I was energetic or driven, but nobody really saw what was happening underneath, how out of control I felt. And that's the reality for so many of us. From the outside, we can look completely fine. We go to work, we smile, we take care of our kids, and people assume, well, if you're doing all that, you must not be that sick. But what they don't realize is how much effort it takes just to function, how much masking is involved. This is where stigma comes in. People assume you can just snap out of it, or they minimize it, saying, oh, everyone gets sad sometimes, or we all have ups and downs. No, this is different. This is a neurological condition. It's not just a mood swing. It's a brain disorder that hijacks your mind and body. And that invisibility makes it so much harder to get understanding and compassion. This is exactly why I wrote my book, Hope's Journey, Finding the Light, is based on my own childhood, on what it felt like to grow up with bipolar symptoms that nobody recognized for what they were. Hope is the main character, and she's a little girl who feels all these big emotions she can't explain. She sends out signals, her version of asking for help, but nobody really listens. The message in a bottle just floats away, unnoticed. And that's exactly how I felt as a kid. In the book, I use symbols, roller coasters, storms, bottles, and light. Because sometimes stories and pictures explain things better than medical terms ever could. Kids can understand what it means to be on a ride that feels too fast. Parents can see what it looks like when a child feels invisible. It's not just a children's book, it's for anyone who's ever felt unseen in their mental health struggle. It's also for people who want to understand their loved ones better. I wrote this because I needed a book like this when I was younger. I needed someone to tell me that what I was feeling was not my fault, that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't alone. And here's the part I really want to stress. Getting diagnosed with bipolar is not easy. In fact, most people go years, sometimes decades, without the right diagnosis. I lived this. For years, doctors told me I had depression or anxiety or both. And yes, I had those symptoms. But treating me for only depression with the wrong medications made things worse. I was being misdiagnosed, like so many others. It wasn't until later in my life that someone finally put the pieces together and said, "This is bipolar 2." And that diagnosis changed everything. Not because it fixed me, it didn't, but because it gave me a map. It gave me language for what I was experiencing. It gave me the chance to find the right treatment plan. But that process was brutal. The trial and error of medications, the waiting, the side effects, the stigma, the feeling of wondering if you'll ever find stability. That's something most people don't talk about. But it's reality for almost everyone on this journey. And that's why I say bipolar is not about willpower. It's not about trying harder. It's about a brain that needs real treatment and real support. It's about surviving long enough to get the right help. And that survival, that's where hope comes in. Bipolar disorder is not a choice. It's not a weakness. It's not about being lazy or irresponsible. It's a brain disorder that takes us on a ride we never asked for. But even in that chaos, there is light. Hope's journey, finding the light, is my way of putting words and images to an experience that so many of us live through silently. But this book and this podcast aren't just for people living with bipolar or the family members supporting them. They're for anyone who can relate to emotions that feel too heavy. Anyone who's ever felt unseen. And anyone who needs a reminder that there's hope in the middle of their chaos. And I'm so excited to finally say this. Hope's Journey, Finding the Light releases this month. And just like this podcast, it exists to remind you that your story matters. Your emotions are valid, and your chaos doesn't define you. My hope is that it reminds you, no matter where you are in your own journey, that light is still possible, even in the darkest places. So as always, remember, there is hope in the chaos. If this podcast resonates with you, if it helps you feel a little more understood or a little less alone, please consider supporting it. I pour everything into these episodes, my time, my heart, and my truth. And your support truly keeps it going. You can make a one-time donation or become a monthly supporter on Ko-fi. Every dollar helps cover production costs, support future episodes, and allows me to continue creating and showing up with honesty and heart. Here's the link: ko-fi.com/I am hope in the chaos. That is ko-fi.com/I am hope in the chaos. You're not just supporting a podcast, you're supporting a lifeline for me and for others who need to hear these words. I am not a licensed therapist, medical provider, or mental health professional. The experiences, stories, and insights shared in this podcast are based solely on my own personal journey and lived experiences. This content is intended only for educational, inspirational, and support purposes. It is not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a licensed mental health professional or healthcare provider regarding your mental health or medical conditions. If you are in crisis or experiencing an emergency, please contact emergency services immediately by calling 911 or reach out to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling 988. You are not alone. You never were, and you never have to be. And remember, there is hope in the chaos.